What's up, everybody? Welcome to Storytime with Writers Playground. Thanks for joining us for our 20th episode.
Oh man, that's exciting. It's been fun so far.
It has been, and we hope you all have been enjoying these stories as much as we are. I just want to apologize for my voice. I have a cold again because that's life with a toddler. Anyway, my name is Mariana.
And I am Eric.
And we are your hosts. And we're happy to be here and excited for another wonderful story that we are going to be sharing with you today.
That's right. You're going to laugh, you're going to cry, you're going to love it. And we'll get to that pretty soon. But first, we've been busy over these last couple of weeks.
Very busy. We've been working hard on our current challenge, our 12 Playground Challenge. And we set the date for when we will announce the winning stories, which will be Thursday, April 30th.
So it's crunch time for us.
Oh, yeah. So look out for that announcement then.
Yep. We're looking forward to making our final selections and sharing those winning stories with you all at that point. And again, that'll be April 30th. And we will start to send out all the individual feedback as soon as that announcement has been made.
That's right. So now let's get into our story for today.
Let's.
Today, we will be reading Despite the Wind by Holly Grover Brandon. And this is a terrific story which won first place out of 691 entries in our 8th Playground Challenge. And in Despite the Wind, an 18-year-old girl, 2 young boys, and a reclusive elderly neighbor work together to survive the aftermath of a destructive hurricane during the summer of 1969.
It's a fantastic story. And Holly Grover Brandon is a talented writer from Petal, Mississippi. She is a preschool teacher and a mother of 4 who squeezes bits of writing into the cracks of a chaotic life. And she has published a few short stories here and there and hopes to add a full-length novel to that list one day. She has participated in a few of our challenges, and she has also won an honorable mention in our 6th challenge for a story called When in Vegas. So hopefully we'll share that on this podcast at some point as well. And you can follow Holly on social media, on Twitter, at HollyGB, on Instagram, at Holly_B_writer, or on Blue Sky, at hollygb.bsky.social.
And we will have all of this information in the description wherever you are listening to this. So make sure to check those out. But for now, enjoy the first place winning story, Despite the Wind. Here we go.
Despite the Wind by Holly Grover Brandon. When the weatherman announced a hurricane was headed our way, Mama said God was punishing us for sending a man to the moon. I almost said that if God hadn't wanted an Apollo 11 mission to happen last month, he would have just stopped it himself. But Mama didn't like it when she thought I knew more than her. Maybe I ought to wait until this storm passes, or take a trip somewhere else, I said. On the radio, they're saying it's reached Category 5. Nah, Donnie, Mama's latest boyfriend, kicked his legs up on the coffee table. This is the best time to go to Biloxi. There ain't gonna be any crowds on the beach. Just please make sure you have my car back in time for the first day of college, I told Mama. Community college, she rolled her eyes. Don't worry, we'll be back in a couple days. How much cash you got, Patty? About $6. Should be enough to get groceries for the 3 of y'all. 3? You'll be watching my boys while you're gone. Donnie spoke around a cigarette clamped between his teeth. I got 'em waiting outside. My jaw fell. And you're just now letting me know this? Mama ignored me, lighting her own cigarette while her boyfriend exhaled a stream of smoke, not bothering to turn away from me. I coughed, fan in the air. Am I even getting paid for this? Donnie sneered. Your mama put a roof over your head, didn't she? Ain't that enough pay? It's your kids I'm watching, not... I froze and took a step back. I hadn't known Donnie long enough to know if he was the type of boyfriend that uses his fists. His eyes narrowed. He looked like he'd been considering it. It'll be good practice for when you're a mama yourself, he said, leaning forward to stub a cigarette out on our coffee table. You're 18, ain't you? May as well get used to looking after youngins. What if the hurricane gets bad? What if the power goes out? Mama scoffed. It's August, Patty. It ain't like you're gonna freeze to death. If you're as smart as you think you are, I reckon you can keep a couple of kids alive for a weekend. This old cabin's solid, Donnie said, reaching behind him to tap a log-stacked wall. It ain't going nowhere. My grandparents left the cabin to me and Mama when they passed, and I thanked heaven every day for it. Mama held on to jobs about as long as she held on to boyfriends, and Donnie was the fourth man she brought home since Christmas. My night shifts bagging groceries at the Piggly Wiggly were the only thing keeping our lights and water on. Donnie stood and walked outside, shouting, "Y'all get in here!" 2 boys skulked inside, shuffling black-bottom bare feet, the apprehension on their faces mirroring my mood. Donnie hollered for his sons to be good, while Mama left without a word and hopped in the driver's seat of my car, waving one hand out the window as her other fiddled with the radio dials. The 3 of us watched them drive down our dirt road until the cloud of dust settled and my old car was swallowed by thick rows of towering pines. I learned the boys were named Billy, 9 years old, and Pete, who was 7. Billy and Pete built a bridge for their toy cars in the creek behind our cabin while I watched from the sandy bank, cooling my feet in the trickling water. "Who's that?" Pete stood knee-deep in the middle of the creek, shielding his eyes from the sun as he pointed behind me. I turned and looked up at the only other home in these woods, a log cabin similar to mine and Mama's on the opposite side of the creek. I saw a face peeking from behind a door before it slammed shut. "That's old Miss Gressler," I told the boys. "She keeps to herself. I don't think I've ever seen her leave that house." That afternoon, I rode my bike 7 miles to the closest grocery store after ordering Billy and Pete to stay inside. We got hurricane warnings every summer, but this one felt different. I stocked up on batteries and shelf-stable food. I hoped the boys liked tuna because it was on sale, 4 cans for $1. That evening, as wind whistled through the trees and the mockingbirds took flight, I made a tuna casserole using the recipe from a Campbell's soup can. It was nothing fancy, but Billy and Pete gobbled it up. I made sure the boys scrubbed their feet before tucking them into Mama's bed. Their snores were soon muffled by howling winds. The pine trees were no strangers to storms, but there was something eerie about the way they swayed and writhed that night, like they knew what was coming. I was bone-tired, but couldn't sleep. I brought my bicycle inside, along with anything else that might blow away. I listened to the radio as the storm, they named it Camille, hit the Mississippi coast a little before midnight. We were about 60 miles inland. The announcer's voice crackled in and out, and I heard the words catastrophic and deadly before they were replaced with empty static. The wind screamed a warning before the rain came crashing down in heavy sheets. Splintering wood snapped, and the low groan of fallen trees filled the air before the cabin shuddered and the lights flickered out. I heard a cry and ran into Mama's room. Billy and Pete were clutching each other, tears shining in the moonlight, but both were unharmed. I ushered them into our little bathroom with blankets and pillows, and we all squeezed into the bathtub together to wait out the storm. I awoke to the sound of water dripping onto the living room floor and left the boys snoozing in the tub while I inspected our little cabin for damage. A few of the windows were shattered, and a fallen tree had smashed through the living room ceiling. I pulled the shower curtain down and climbed onto a chair, doing my best to patch the hole with the help of duct tape and desperation, knowing it was up to me alone to keep those boys safe. When they awoke, Billy and Pete were anxious to look around outside, but we barely managed to open the front door. Mangled tree trunks, limbs, and pine needles were scattered and piled crisscross all over, like a giant game of pickup sticks. "How's our daddy and your mama gonna get back here?" Pete asked. "You can't even see the road no more." I sucked in a breath. Travel delays were the least of my worries when it came to their little beach trip. "Somebody will come clear the road," I said, hoping I sounded more sure than I was. No one was getting in or out of here for a long while. The boys and I got to work clearing a path to the creek. The water was out in the cabin, along with the power, so we carried containers to fill. We toted 2 sloshing buckets to Miss Gressler's cabin and knocked, sending a brood of chicken hens scattering. The door creaked open by a few inches as she poked her head out. "Ma'am," I said, "we just wanted to check on you. The water's not running and—" "I'm fine, just leave me be." We did as we were told, setting the water buckets at her door. Back home, I boiled creek water on our wood stove. I never thought I'd be happy Mama couldn't save enough for an electric one. We ate leftover casserole for both lunch and dinner since everything in the fridge would spoil soon enough. The next morning, me and the boys returned to the creek with more containers to fill, plus a bar of soap. I made them turn around as I scrubbed away sweat and grime, then instructed them to do the same. We stayed in that creek for hours, the cold water a balm against the stifling summer heat. I noticed the buckets by Miss Gressler's door were filled with something red. On closer inspection, we realized she replaced the water with tomatoes. When her door opened, Billy, Pete, and I sprang back as if we'd been caught doing something wrong. "Got too many tomatoes. Thought y'all could use some." Miss Gressler glanced at the filled buckets and bowls we carried. "Sure would appreciate more water if it ain't too much trouble." "Yes, ma'am," I said, taking the tomatoes gratefully. "Of course." Billy lifted one of the water buckets. "Can I bring this inside for you?" Miss Gressler hesitated, then nodded, gesturing for all three of us to follow. The tiny cabin was overflowing with potted plants, piles of fruits and vegetables, stacks of full egg crates, and jars of canned goods. "I brought in everything I could carry when the storm started up. Even the chickens," Miss Gressler said, gesturing to the hordes of food. "Y'all got enough to eat?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "We'll be fine for at least another week." She nodded. "Well, y'all keep bringing me water, and I'll be happy to share what I've got." I wondered why she didn't just get the water herself. The creek wasn't far, and she seemed plenty strong enough to carry it, but I wasn't about to argue with someone offering us fresh food, and we surely would have starved without her. Every day we brought her a bucket or two of water, and every day she returned them filled with something to eat. We spent our days in the creek and our nights in the cabin, listening to folks on the radio talk about the soldiers sent to Vietnam and the aftermath of a music festival called Woodstock. They read lists of local people whose loved ones were searching for them after the hurricane. We never heard our names, and we never spoke of what that might have meant. One afternoon, Miss Gressler handed us a bucket filled with purple hull peas and a rusty box of little green army men. I thought the boys might enjoy them. "Thank you, ma'am," Billy said, as Pete nodded his agreement. "We will." The older woman's eyes turned shiny as she beckoned us inside. I sat on the faded sofa with Miss Gressler while the boys took seats on the floor, setting their new toys up for battle. She and I watched them play, a tiny smile softening her face. "My son used to play with those for hours," she sniffed, pointing to a framed black and white photograph of a young boy sporting thick glasses and a crooked grin. The same pair of glasses sat propped beside the picture, frames twisted and lens shattered. "He used to line 'em up on the creek bed and knock 'em down with pebbles from his slingshot." Judging by the boys' expressions, they thought that was a marvelous idea. "Where's your son now?" Billy asked. Miss Gressler took a breath, deep and shaky. "He died a long time ago, I'm afraid." The soldiers paused their battle as the two boys dropped their toys and turned to face her. "How'd he die?" "Drowned in the creek out back." She dabbed her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "Big storm came through one day, flooded the creek. He fell in, got trapped in the debris, pulled his body out myself." She reached over and lifted the broken glasses from the table. "Found these in the sand the day we buried him, and I ain't stepped foot near that creek since." After a heavy stretch of silence, Billy cleared his throat. "Our mama died in a car wreck, and our daddy is probably dead too." Pete fingered a knot in the wood floor, his chin trembling. "I never met my daddy." Three blurred faces turned in my direction as tears burned my eyes. "And I don't think Mama's coming back." I forced a sad smile. "I reckon every one of us is alone." The boys stood, Billy squeezing himself between me and Miss Gressler as Pete climbed into my lap. He laid his head on my chest and whispered, "At least we're alone together." After that, we began to spend more time at Miss Gressler's cabin, sharing food and books and stories and each other's company. I told them about the time Mama fell asleep with a lit cigarette and almost set our cabin on fire, and she told us how her daddy went to jail for bootlegging moonshine during the Prohibition. "Do you think the hurricane was punishment for those astronauts going to the moon?" I asked her one day. "That's what my mama said." Miss Gressler considered before answering. "I reckon some things just happen to us, like that storm, and other things happen because of us." She stroked Billy's hair as he leaned against her. "If folks just sat around waiting for God to tell them what to do, we'd still be living in caves, wondering what them shiny things in the sky really are." I nodded, fanning myself with the back of my hand. "Mama also said I wasn't cut out for college. Suppose she was wrong about that too?" I know it ain't nice to talk about the dead, or the likely dead, Pete piped in, but it sounds like your mama ain't got the sense God gave a goose. Miss Gressler tried and failed to hide her smile. I think that about sums it up. We walked with her to the creek when she said she was ready, our hands gripped tightly in hers. She cried when her feet touched the water. By the time it reached her knees, she was laughing under her tears. She closed her eyes and sank backwards into the creek, a baptism long overdue. While enjoying watermelon one afternoon, the familiar song of cicadas was interrupted by the jarring buzz of a chainsaw. It was strange seeing another human outside the three I'd grown so close to the last few weeks. The orange of his vest shone through the browns and greens of the woods like headlights on a country road at midnight. He came over once he saw us, clipboard in hand, asking whether we needed any help. More workers joined him, all from the National Guard, bringing tools and blue tarps and questions. When they asked if we had food, I told them we did, thanks to Miss Gressler. When they asked if we were looking for anyone, we gave them Mama and Donnie's names. When they asked if the boys needed to be taken to social services, I didn't know what to say. Billy put his arm around Pete, both boys wide-eyed and shivering. I couldn't bear to watch them leave with strangers, or even worse, what if social services separated them? Those two were the only blood either had left in the world. They can stay with me, I blurted out. I'm 18. The man with the clipboard raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. You've got classes to attend, young lady. Miss Gressler went to stand behind Billy and Pete, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. They'll be staying with me. I'm their grandmother. The boys' mouths dropped open as they turned their faces to hers. Relief and love and surprise all mashed together as one. I swallowed hard and looked away, blinking back tears. All right, ma'am, that all sounds fine. Just make sure you get the legalities squared away and get these boys registered at the elementary school. It's opening back up next month. Yes, sir. We'll see that it's taken care of. The National Guard members assured us the electricity and water would be restored by the end of the day, and that the roads had been cleared for driving. When they asked if we needed anything else before they left, we told them no and thanked them for their help. We celebrated that night by turning on all the lights in the cabin and taking long turns in the shower. I rode my bicycle to the grocery store and searched the half-stock shelves for things on the shopping list Miss Gressler had handed me. The slip of paper folded with a $10 bill. We dined on anything a chicken couldn't lay or a garden couldn't grow. Frosted Flakes, Mallow Cups, SpaghettiOs, and Pop-Tarts. We collapsed on the floor, stretching and sighing with full-bellied contentment in front of Miss Gressler's window unit. I wish we could do this every night, I said, closing my eyes and shivering pleasantly in the cool air. But then I suppose it wouldn't be as special. Pete yawned, resting his head on Miss Gressler's legs. And we'd all be fat as hogs. The four of us fell into a sugar-fueled fit of giggles, and I tried to remember when I'd ever felt so happy. When thoughts of Mama brought feelings of guilt, I pushed them back into the shadowy corner of my mind, wondering if the boys felt the same about their daddy. We'd unpack those boxes later, a little at a time. I went back to bagging groceries at night and taking classes during the day. My hard work earned me a used pickup truck and good grades in all my classes. Before I knew it, I was applying to universities outside of town. I couldn't imagine leaving Miss Gressler and the boys, but I knew they'd be just fine without me. I came home every weekend during university, then every month after graduating, and every holiday after that. Miss Gressler, Granny Gressler, me and the boys took to calling her, joined her arm with mine as I walked down the aisle, two teenage boys watching proudly from the front row. Through the decades of babies and jobs and sorrows and joy, we kept in touch, even after Granny left us, reunited with their first little boy. We buried her body alongside his, returning every August with our own children and theirs, to sit near the creek and share stories of a storm called Camille and the family she brought together.
That was Despite the Wind by Holly Grover Brandon. And what a beautiful piece.
Yeah, they say there's no such thing as a perfect story, but I think this is pretty damn close.
It is one of my favorites that we have gotten, for sure. Where should we start?
Well, let's just start at the beginning. I love how she sets up the premise and how we immediately begin to get a sense of the family dynamic right away as we see Patty's mother and Donnie getting ready to go to the beach in spite of the hurricane warning. It's clear that they aren't the most responsible people.
And it's clear that Patty is the responsible one in the family and that she has been able to do pretty well for herself in spite of her mother and the way she belittles her accomplishments, emphasizing how it's just community college.
Yeah, we read Patty is the one who's been able to hold down the job at the Piggly Wiggly. It's her car. She's been the one responsible for keeping the lights on. She's watching the kids while they leave.
And we read her mother hasn't held down a job. Donnie's the fourth boyfriend brought home since Christmas. The instability of the household is very clear, and we have sympathy for the character right away.
Definitely. And I like the part in which we read, I hadn't known Donnie long enough to know if he was the type of boyfriend that uses fists, which is terrible, but that is a great example of how to give the reader information indirectly. It's not explicitly stated here, but this sentence makes it clear that she has experienced getting hit by boyfriends in the past. And this whole opening is a fantastic example of how to introduce characters and give the reader some clear background naturally within an actual scene. As opposed to a lot of times when you see people want to summarize a bunch of background at the beginning of the story in paragraphs and then jump into the narrative from there. But this is a perfect example of showing, not telling, which I think is often misunderstood. It's not all about descriptive language. It's about getting right into a scene. We're pulled in. We begin learning about the characters through the action of the scene, through the dialogue, and she sprinkles in bits of relevant information within that scene as it plays out. It's so much stronger and engaging for the reader than summarizing paragraphs of background in an overview before getting into the actual story. Sorry, I went on for a second there.
It's all good. Those are all good points. I love the interaction that we get between Patty and the boys. Once Donnie and her mother leave, all of the other characters are very likable. There is some gripping tension during the storm, and then still a sense of danger once it passes, and we see that they are going to be stuck without power and with dwindling supplies. And then the relationship that they form with Mrs. Grossler is very charming.
Yeah, it's such a nice moment when they leave the water and then find the tomatoes in the bucket later. I like how the first time we see Miss Grossler, she is sort of snappy with them, but then how she quickly warms up. It's just so heartwarming to see people, strangers especially, when really looking out for one another.
One of the things that I think Holly did so well in this piece was the way she was able to combine so many elements into one piece. We get trauma, neglect, hints at abuse, emotionally from her mother, which is really sad. We get such heartwarming and loving moments too. These people taking care of one another. There are moments that made us tear up out of heartbreak, learning about Mrs. Grossler's son. There are moments that made us tear up out of love and hope, which we get in the end. And there are also moments that made us laugh out loud, like when Pete says, "It sounds like your mama ain't got the sense God gave a goose."
Yeah, I love that line. Or when he says, "And we be fat as hogs." That made me laugh as well.
Yeah, that one was great. We get all of these different emotions, happy, sad, laughter, tears, all in one piece. And that's completely natural. It's not forced at all. It is not an easy thing to do.
Not at all. My hands down favorite moment in this story is when the National Guard is there asking if the boys need to be taken to social services. And we see how Patty worries about them in the system, the possibility of them being separated. And she says, "They can stay with me. I'm 18." Which is such a beautiful moment because she's basically offering to sacrifice her freedom and her future for these boys. Which is just so incredibly selfless and admirable. And that beautiful gesture is only eclipsed when Mrs. Grossler steps in and says, "You've got classes to attend, young lady." That line makes me tear up every time. Not only is she offering to take the boys, but she's telling Patty that she believes in her, even though her own mother didn't and cut her down. That part just hits me so hard. I love it.
And the ending is so beautiful. We read that Mrs. Grossler walked her down the aisle at her wedding. The ending is just wrapped up so nicely.
Yeah, I had read the damn thing like 10 times when I was recording because I kept tearing up and just had to get through it. It's just really beautiful how it ends. I love the final line, we buried her body alongside his, returning every August with our own children and theirs, to sit near the creek and share stories of a storm named Camille and the family she brought together. Like you said, she tied it up so nicely. But not in a way that felt like over the top or hokey, like a Hollywood ending that feels too good to be true or unrealistic. This really felt genuine and believable to me.
And it is the scene earlier when they are all together. We learn about the loss of Mrs. Grossler's son. The boys mention losing their mother. Patty mentions not knowing her father. How they figured that Donnie and her mom are now gone too. We see all they lost, and Pete says, "At least we're alone together." That is a great line, and it sets up the ending beautifully, how they created their own family. And it kind of made me think about this movie we watched a couple years ago, a Korean movie called Shoplifters, that also taps on what a biological family is versus what like real family is, you know? It made me think of that. But the movie is beautiful as well as the story.
Yeah, that was a great film as well. I love it. Anything else you want to say?
I don't think so.
All right. So for the prompts, Holly chose a babysitter or nanny for the character, a cabin in the woods for the setting, and the one thing that everyone had to include in this challenge was some broken eyeglasses, which we saw with Miss Grussler's sons.
If you enjoyed this story, make sure to follow Holly on social media. On Twitter at HollyGB, on Instagram at Holly_B_writer, or on Blue Sky at hollygb.bsky.social. And this information will be in the description wherever you're listening to this.
Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back for another episode in 2 weeks. And until then, we're going to get back to reading your stories and writing your feedback.
Take care.
See ya.